Hey everybody, it's Aunt Bibi. Today is Thursday, October 17th, 2019. I'm Barb Hammer. So I'm been talking a lot about Hong Kong and things related to Hong Kong. Um, and I get kind of overwhelmed. There's so many things going on, not just in Hong Kong, but I realized everything that I'm looking at is like a psyop. So I'm still going to talk about Hong Kong and one incident in particular that happened on Wednesday. So I'll throw this term around PSYOP. It's abbreviation of psychological operations, or yeah, PSYOPs, psychological operations. And I'll refer to color revolutions like what we see in Hong Kong as a PSYOP. And so got to thinking about psyops, and one thing that's not a psyop is that my Twitter account was just taken down this week. That's a second account in a little over a year. The first account was taken down over Venezuela, so it seems to be three strikes you're out on Twitter. So that one went down January, February, and then now this one. And this one was in a heated exchange with a fellow from Nicaragua who knows Max Blumenthal, and Max Blumenthal is a psyop. You could say that. So he's mm, limited hangout, cognitive infiltrator. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, psyops. I started thinking about psyops and what I know about psyops, and it's a big topic. And so the I've talked about Gene Sharp. Gene Sharp is that CIA academic, military academic, I would call him, and he is considered the godfather of the color revolution. A color revolution is a psyop. So people are think they will see protests in a country for regime change, pressuring the government to change, and people will think it's made to look grassroots, but it's not. So there's a huge complex, the CIA complex, I call it. Or, yeah, I got that term from Jeff J. Brown of the China Rising blog. So CIA complex is all these NGOs and intelligence agencies in other Western countries, especially the Five Eyes. Those are the Anglo countries. Um, and the media, and they just buy off everybody. So anyway, I started thinking about psyops, and I realized, yeah, so there was actually a predecessor to Gene Sharp, and there's always a predecessor, and one person will expand upon the ideas of somebody before them. And it's kind of like the Epstein ring that Whitney Webb from Press News did research about. And so Epstein wasn't the first one to run this honey trap, I guess, this whole operation. Anyway, so I started thinking about psyops, and I realized, yeah, before Gene Sharp, there was Edward Bernays. Now, if you're not familiar with Edward Bernays, he's considered the father of propaganda, or as it's more politely called, public relations. So I first became familiar with Edward Bernays because I watched a video. I had never heard of him before, and a lot of people haven't. But once you get into digging around into propaganda and psyops, um, you become aware of this figure. So I had watched this 2 years ago, yeah, a couple of years ago. Yeah, in 2017, I guess. Meet Edward Bernays, Master of Propaganda. And this was on James Corbett's Corbett Report Extras. Now, James Corbett, I don't really watch so much anymore, so he's kind of he's a limited hangout. Yeah, so You notice his channels don't get taken down, when YouTube censors. No, they don't take down James Corbett. He's doing just fine. And that's because he's a libertarian, and libertarians are neoliberals. So the business community likes him. So he won't give you the full truth. They'll give you a lot of good information, James Corbett. So I would recommend you watch this video about Edward Bernays, and I will put that link in the show notes. And there are actually many other videos you can watch about Edward Bernays. So very interesting character, Edward Bernays. So who was Edward Bernays? So Edward Bernays was um, an Austrian American, and he was born in the Gilded Age. Hooray! So he was born in 1891, and his one of his big claims, that's Edward Bernays right there. You can see his picture, and he his one of his big claims to fame is that um he was the nephew on both sides of his family, his mother and father. He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. Yeah. So I guess it ran in the family, this interest in psychology. So here it says he's considered the pioneer in the field of public relations and propaganda. And yeah, he was named one of the 100 most influential Americans of the 20th century. Yeah, I would say so. And so there was a biography, um, and a documentary about him. And yeah, so he really influenced the business community a lot, and the political world too. So, in the political world, I realize I don't follow, the reason I don't vote, because I realize elections really a psyop, at least in the US and Canada where have citizenship. And debates, so they just had a Democratic Party debate the other night. And I tried to watch some of it, but it's just so disgustingly obvious to me. And I cannot believe that people are still getting manipulated over this stuff. But it's a psyop. Yeah. So it's very slick packaging of something that's not real or doesn't really affect us. We don't really have a say about who runs Canada or the US or most Western countries. So, anyway, so Edward Bernays, he was able to get women. One thing is, he was able to get women to start smoking in the 20s. And so he got women to think think of them as torches of freedom. So it was a symbol of liberation to smoke. So unfortunately, more women smoke now than before. And before, it wasn't considered polite for women to smoke. So that's the sad thing that he's done. He was also involved in the CIA coup against the Guatemalan government in 1954, and that involved the United Fruit Company. So they started smearing the president. I think Arbenz was his name at the time, and this was after Iran. So Edward Bernays helped them spread through academia, all the influential figures in Guatemalan society, that the idea of nationalizing businesses like United Fruit Company is not a good idea. So this was built up a lot of opposition to the president and of Guatemala. And Edward Bernays also, as far as business, he popularized the eating in the U.S. of bananas. Bananas were not really a fruit that Americans ate before, but that changed. Also, he popularized the eating of bacon and eggs for Americans. Um, yeah, so his career is very interesting. He's a president. So World War I, he started getting involved in government propaganda for the war effort, and then that continued afterwards. So he worked for the Committee on Public Information, and yeah, yes, he worked in media. Yes, he worked in media and business and in government politics. Um, so there's a lot of stuff you can read about him. Um, yeah. So during World War II, then he advised the U.S. Information Agency, which is a sort of a military intelligence kind of propaganda arm, I guess. So he helped them with wartime propaganda. Uh, it says he turned down the Nazis, Nicaragua under the Somoza family, Francisco Franco, and Richard Nixon. That's interesting. Hmm. So, yeah, a lot of there's a story about the torches of freedom. Yeah, women smoking. There's the here's the account of, so it was against yeah, so they yeah, so Arbenz, yeah, it was after they went after President Arbenz of Guatemala, and they started a campaign against that government, and he was overthrown. So, yeah, uh, yeah, it's interesting. Oh, what was it? I saw, yeah, something. So the idea was it's about, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So um he was influenced by other people, and so he cited other people. So this Gustave Le Bon, who was into psychology, and oh yeah, the crowd. So he did studies about the crowd, a study of the popular mind. So how do people think? And yeah, the herd instinct. So, people tend to run with the crowd, go with the crowd. So they're influenced if they're in a group. It's a group dynamics. So, yeah. And so yeah, propaganda. So Psyops then, um, oh, there are lots of videos if you want to look. Oh, wait, I forgot. Okay. So I found a couple of videos. It's interesting. If you do a search on PsyOps, there is this army recruiting video for promoting work in the army in PsyOps, psychological operations. So it says persuade, change, influence. So it's this hearts and minds kind of thing. It's interesting. And then there's this other video that goes into explains psyops, and so there's psychological operations, and within the overall field in the military, this is just the military information support operations. So this is the military structure. So there's this U.S. Army Special Operations Command within the U.S. Special Operations Command in the military, and then there's psychological warfare too. It's very interesting. Um, so there's a lot here you can read through. There's some things I saw. Um, so it's just persuading people um, to do or to think in a certain way, behave in a certain way. And within the psyop field, there's gray, white, gray, and black psyops. This was a new one. So the white psyops is just straight official stuff, things, information from an official source, um, and it's not hidden that it's from an official source. So this would be like press releases. That's a white psyop, that sort of thing. Um, so the State Department, U.S. Information Agency, which that's propaganda, really. Yeah, Foreign Operations Administration, predecessor of the Agency for International Development. That I didn't know. So, um, Defense Department. Yeah. So the gray psyop then. So white psyop is just official statements, pretty much. So pretty open that it's from an official source. Gray psyop is kind of ambiguous and um, they make it sound like it's not from an official source. They're kind of concealing that fact. Like it's a gray psyop. Um, so if you kind of hide the fact that the government is behind something, people are probably more likely to accept it. So yeah, there's that gray, and then black psyops is just yeah, black psyops I'd say is just pure propaganda. Yeah. Um, so it's concealing the fact that there are interests behind. So they're covert psyops. Um, And yeah, this is when you get into the media. So this is media propaganda. And so there's the CIA Operation Mockingbird, which was deliberately feeding information and planting people in the mainstream media who were promoting propaganda. And, information being in the mainstream media, that's really just official propaganda. Um, let's see. I don't know. You can really get into a lot of this. The thing about, oops, sorry. Um, there was something. Yeah. So there's PSYOP. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's the army. It seems to do the military psyops. And during the Iraq War, there was actually a special operations manual, and that was psychological operations, really. And there were anthropologists who were behind who had developed that manual to be used in Iraq. So here they have an example of white psyop from Voice America, which is CIA. Um, something, yeah. So covert. Oh yeah, it was down here. There's a lot in here. So it's down. They get into the CIA. That's where I saw it. Yeah. Psychological operations was assigned to the pre CIA Office of Policy Coordination with oversight by the State Department. Yeah, so, that's the thing. People think the State Department is just a bunch of diplomats, but the State Department is really an arm of the CIA. And you can see that because Mike Pompeo was President Trump's director of the CIA, and now he's the Secretary of State. So it's not really a big transition for him because they're doing the same thing. Yeah. So State Department is involved in CIA psyops. And you can see that in Hong Kong because the diplomats at the consulate were seen. There was a diplomat seen with Joshua Wong and other figures who are involved in the protests, which have turned into riots and terrorism, really. So there's covert psychological warfare, censorship, domestic, yeah. Um, so this is during the war, during the wars. Yeah, they use this in Cold War. Yeah, Cold War. Um, yeah, Nicaragua. See, they use this psyops. I mean, we're just being inundated with psyops. Oh, yeah, this was a controversy. CNN and NPR interns, so um, there were soldiers from the psyop group who were interning at CNN and NPR, National Propaganda Radio, really is what it is. Mm, yeah, so that's how they were being trained to manipulate the media. Yeah, the toppling of Saddam Hussein's statue, that was staged. That was staged. Yes, staged. Um, yeah. Yeah, here we go. Pentagon analysts in the mainstream media. So you'll see a lot of analysts, military analysts in the mainstream media, but they're really just assets there. Yeah, so they've been portrayed, psyops have been portrayed in movies. And then in psychological warfare, um, so it's sort of the same, similar, I guess. Psychological warfare would be part of irregular warfare. So you can say psychological operations, psyops, or psychological warfare, and I guess it's more or less interchangeable. Um, so here's the political warfare, hearts and minds, propaganda. Yeah. So the various techniques that are used, and you can see that what's going on in Hong Kong, how they manipulate people, and the media manipulates people, and it's very involved. So they target the audience's value system, beliefs, emotions, motives, reasoning, or behavior. Yeah, and black operations. Oh, that's the thing. So false flag attacks, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. There's a particular incident in Hong Kong. There was a false flag. There have been many false flag attacks in Hong Kong, and it's almost like the false flag revolution. Um, so those get kind of blown way out of those get blown way out of proportion, whereas the real violence against ordinary people in Hong Kong and against the police is downplayed all the time. And so I think this is a lot of similar information on the other page. Yeah, I think. Oh, yeah, false flag offense. Here we go. So methods. There are different methods. Yeah, so demoralize and false flag events are a big thing, and they're doing that a lot. So it's information warfare, terrorism. So that's part of it. See, okay, this is the thing that the psychological warfare. They're using terrorism a lot in Hong Kong. Information warfare, false flag attacks. Yes, white propaganda. Okay, yeah, yeah. So there's white propaganda, omissions, and emphasis. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, white propaganda, gray propaganda, black propaganda, which is outright deceit. So, anyway, so the specific event that I wanted to talk about, that's a psyop and a false flag attack, if it'll come up, is this Jimmy Sham event. So Jimmy Sham is the head of the he's called the convener, but he's head of the Hong Kong, it's a Civil Human Rights Front. And my joke is the only word in the name that is correct is it's a front. Uh, it's not civil, or it's not about really about human rights. And the Civil Human Rights Front actually receives money directly from the National Endowment for Democracy. So that, and the NED is a CIA front. So I've talked about in this another video, and there was a video with Michelle Greenstein from RT, and she explained some of the local groups that are receiving money directly from the from NED, and Jimmy Sham's group is one. So let me see if I can bring this up to get a bigger image. I'm not sure if it will. Yeah, okay. So here's Jimmy Sham. So this image appears. So he was attacked on Wednesday evening, Wednesday night. I'm not sure. It was in the evening or at night. And so this is the picture that people saw the next day. And it's clearly staged. So he's next to, yeah, so here you can see better, a little bit better here. So he was found lying next to, I guess this is his car, I don't know. And so he's lying here, and it's just ridiculous looking because there's no one attending to him. So anybody who would find him, and there were apparently people in the area who saw the attack. Nobody recorded the attack. But all you see is this image, and there's no one attending to him. He's lying there, and someone is taking pictures of him. And it's just the fakest looking thing I've ever seen in my life. Um, and people were mocking it because it's just ridiculous. So it says here, uh, he's bled heavily from his head and arms. And I also heard that he was injured his legs or knee or something. I don't know. So there's this blood, and he's lying there, and his eyes were open. And people, there was a, I couldn't find this, but there was a lady who posed in the same position with her um, eyes open like that. And I'm only laughing because I know this is fake. And it's just so obvious to people who really look at it closely. So he's lying there, and there is blood, but I don't see any wounds. There's just been blood. Um, and someone else, uh, yeah. So I think it was another. So that's the image that everybody saw. Um, and um, okay. So I saw that. Yeah. So here we go. Uh, So he was hit with hammers. I think that's the story. He was four, five or six people who attacked him, and yeah, I call him Jimmy the Sham Scammer, uh, false flag drama queen, color revolution. Um, oh, here's an image of the cop who was stabbed with a box cutter, and he was badly hurt. And the weird thing is, he was, he was the victim of a real attack, and um, the hospital might have released him too soon. So I think the local medical community is compromised, and they tend to favor the protesters, I believe. So there was another image, close up. So I'm just, this is my Twitter. These are my Twitter posts. I'm just going through. Um, and they were saying that they were South Asian. That was the other story that was going around, that they're South Asian. But there was an image somebody posted of Jimmy. Close up of, come on, where is it? No, I can't find it. Of his hand. This was the weird thing. There was a close up of his hand. I think there was more stuff coming out after I posted all this stuff. Yeah, here we go. This is it. So, somebody noticed the hand, and you could kind of see that, but they always like people look at details. So here's the image. Yeah, that's the image of Jimmy Sham lying there. And then if you look closely though, he's propping himself. He's posing. So, he's still he's posing. He's obviously posing. He's got his hand in that position to make sure he's just right for his picture debut. And it's just ridiculous. So here, people posted him. Okay, compare. So these are real attacks. Um, so I think this was a cop. This is this poor taxi driver. I'm going to talk about this in another video. And I can't remember. So there've been so many attacks where people are just beaten to a pulp. And yet these people, there's Jimmy Sham, and I can't remember Roy. I don't know. There was another. I didn't know about this attack. There was another protest figure, and he claimed to be attacked, and it just looked ridiculous. And then that's Denise Ho. So they're just a bunch of drama queens. And meanwhile, there is real violence, people being hurt, and it's just ridiculous. So we're just inundated. So a lot of my Twitter posts are about all the fake stuff going on. So what's interesting, so these psyops, these color revolutions, they are spreading like wildfire. I mean, they're just everywhere. So Hong Kong is modeled after. Um, oh, there's something else. Wait a minute. Sorry, I forgot. More along lines of there's more to say about Jimmy Sham. So Jimmy Sham too. Another thing came out. Oh yeah. So here are more articles. Jimmy Sham. Here we go. So apparently his group put out um, this flyer, and so they think the false flag attack is to get more people out for a protest on Sunday because the numbers are dwindling. The violence is still bad and getting worse, I would say, but the numbers of people coming out for the protests are dwindling. So um, the attack on Jimmy Sham happened after the vote in Congress. And I know the House passed that Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, I believe. And that's a whole nother story. So there was speculation that things would die down after that gets passed and signed. It hasn't been. I don't know that the House. I'm not. I don't know that the Senate has voted on it yet, and then the president has to sign it for it to become law. But there was speculation that things would die down after that because the thought was that that was the real push to get that legislation passed, and then things would die down maybe. Um, so the false flag attack, they think, was to get more people out for the protest on Sunday against the mask law, and I think they want to demand that the police force in Hong Kong be reformed, or just completely revamped or something. I don't know. So they printed out these flyers, and it mentions the flyers apparently mention the attack, and they were printed. So apparently, when you print things in Hong Kong, there's going to be a date. There's going to be like a date timestamp. So they're apparently printed out and mentioned the attack before the attack even took place. Yeah, so that shows you that thing is very fake, very fake. Um, oh yeah, okay. The other thing about Jimmy. Mm, Jimmy, these are images of Jimmy in the hospital, and he's smiling. And people were posting pictures of people who actually have been hit in the head with like hammers, and they got like dents in their head. I mean, that's ridiculous. So when they hauled him into when he was on the stretcher for the ambulance, so his head's all wrapped up, and they've got a oxygen mask on him, and they make him look like he's on death's door. And here he is, all smiles in the hospital, and he's just got a little thing on his head. And that reminds me of oh, yeah, I remember there was a one of these mass shootings in the US, and they talked to a victim and he had like the same sort of so Jimmy Sham's got the false flag mass shooting tissue or something on his head. I think people were joking about. If you look closely, I think maybe I can bring this up. Yeah, so there's Jimmy, all smiles, and he's just got this little thing on his head. Like he's fine. And the thing that's what's so stupid is it's moving. There it is. And then it's suddenly on the back of his head. I don't know. What the heck? So, uh, it's just so stupid. I mean, it's just ridiculous, this stuff. Oh, yeah, here, sorry. Yes, they're just mocking him. They've just been mocking him on Twitter. That's crazy. Uh, yeah, there's the images again. So this is the flyer that was printed up and printed up before he had even been attacked. And here are more images. So, oh, okay, they're pointing something else out here. Like I can't read the Chinese, but the images speak for themselves. They really do. So there's his eye looking fine, and then here, I think I can bring this up bigger. Ah, come on. I don't think it wants to do that. Oh, come on. So here, he's got a bruised eye, but his eye is fine here. So there was some makeup. And here's the oxygen tube or mask or whatever, and his head bandaged. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So this is clearly staged psyop. Yeah, so that's classic psyop. False flag attacks are part of psychological warfare, and that's what they're doing in Hong Kong. And we're just being played. Honestly, we're being played in elections, everything that goes on. We're just being distracted with all this bullshit. And the thing I've been posting a lot about on Twitter is these color revolutions. So the one, what's going on in Indonesia is another color revolution. There's still protests going on there, and there's a connection. I talked about this in another video. There's a connection between Hong Kong and Indonesia. There's also so Hong Kong is modeled after the Ukraine Maidan Revolution 2014, that winter. And now Ukraine has a neo-Nazi government and well, neo-Nazis in the government. And it seems like they're trying, oh yeah, so they are trying to, I think they're trying to take down the current president because he ran on a anti-war platform or camp. He had an anti-war campaign when he was running for office, and he doesn't want this tension with Russia, and he wants to end the war in East Ukraine and Donbass, where people are ethnically Russian, really. And so the Maidan Revolution caused the deaths of thousands of people, and then Crimea voted to join Russia. They didn't want to be part of Ukraine anymore. They didn't want to have anything to do with that anymore. So Hong Kong is modeled after the Maidan Revolution, and then Indonesia has ties to the Hong Kong Revolution. And now in Catalonia, there's another color revolution, a repeat of what happened in 2017, and they have openly admitted that they're modeling their color revolution after Hong Kong's. And so they blocked the airport, they've been blocking roads, they've been sabotaging rail service, throwing stuff on the tracks, being very starting fires, throwing Molotov cocktails at the cops, very violent. It's not everybody, but they're trying to get large numbers of people out, and there are all these mm, suspicious NGOs, or there's a group called Democratic Tsunami, that's operating in Catalonia, and nobody knows who's behind it. And there are other groups, and but it's just really weird that they are openly saying that they're modeling their color revolution after Hong Kong's, and um, yeah, it's just weird. And people have gotten upset with me and saying, no, 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 the Catalan protesters, they want independence and freedom. And I said, well, no, that's not what they they might think that's what they want, but they're being manipulated to get in the streets. And there's just a hardcore group of very violent people who've been trained. I'm sure they've been trained. They're all trained. Um, yeah. So, and Extinction Rebellion is another color revolution. So, on a global scale, and I've looked into the figures behind that, and there are other researchers who they have this. What's weird is they have this. They claim they have non-violent methods, but they never say peaceful. They say non-violent. So what they really mean is they have the word violent. They keep saying, and they even admit. So Jamila Rakib, who runs Gene Sharp's Einstein Institution, she says, well, we're not ruling out violence. It's just very sneaky the way they say this. So they pretend that they're nonviolent protests, but they become violent, very violent, and trigger wars. So psyops are very dangerous. We're being played, we're being brainwashed, people are being fooled, and because people, um, they're easily influenced in groups, and that's what this I don't know, they're just psyops everywhere, so we're just being played for fools or suckers, and it's just a world of political theater, and debates are political theater, psyops. Um anyway, that's it for now. So I'm seeing a lot of Chinese who are following the concerned about the Hong Kong protests, and they're seeing protests in Catalonia and even protests in Chile, and they were saying, "Oh, it's spreading to other countries." Um, and but they seem to think that the protests in Catalonia are real, and I said, "No, those aren't real. That's just a copy of Hong Kong." And I had to explain that there are real protests, like the Yellow Vest movement in France. Um, in Chile, there's some protests going on. Ecuador, there's a real because they are fighting for economic survival, and they're fighting against um, neoliberal austerity. And Haiti, those are real protests, very real protests. So I'm really disgusted that people are getting so manipulated. The mainstream media, they tend to focus on the fake protests, and they virtually ignore the real protests, or they smear the protesters. So these psyops are very dangerous. We're in a very dangerous situation. They've just hijacked street protests now. So anyway, I guess that's it for now. So I will still be talking about Hong Kong. There's so much more going on, and I've been following Catalonia, what's going on there too. So anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for your patience, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye. Oh, I forgot. I'm having problems with this software, so I'm going to actually run this a little bit longer, and I will scroll through my Twitter feed while I do this, so you can see my Twitter feed now. Yeah, so you'll see my page. Oops, yeah, so I have the Cockroach Daily now as my cover picture because it's just funny. It's just funny.